Welcome, everyone. Before we even start today's material, I really want to take a moment to just look right at you, our listener, and offer a sincere divine blessing for your day and for your entire upcoming week.
Absolutely.
May you find profound clarity, enduring peace, and really just a renewed sense of purpose in whatever circumstances you're navigating right now. We are truly thrilled you've chosen to spend this time with us.
It is always a privilege to have you joining us at the table, and the journey we've mapped out for you today is, well, it's nothing short of extraordinary. We're looking at a narrative that really bridges personal trauma with global geopolitics.
We really are.
Yeah.
So our mission today is to completely immerse ourselves in the final chapter of the book of Genesis. That's chapter 50.
Right.
And to build out this deep dive, we're pulling from the extensive insights of two highly respected sources, the Holman Study Bible and the NAA Study Bible.
Both incredible resources.
Yeah. And if you're familiar with this text, you know we are dealing with a dramatic, sweeping finale here. I mean, we're talking about an ancient Egyptian state funeral that literally stops an entire region in its tracks.
Totally. It's a massive event.
And we've got incredibly tense family dynamics, deep-seated fears bubbling to the surface after, what, decades of suppression?
Decades, yeah.
And a profound realization about how history's darkest moments can be transformed into monumental good.
It's the ultimate culmination of a multi-generational saga. We've watched this family struggle, fracture, and somehow survive. And now the narrative brings us to this moment of raw, unfiltered human emotion that really sets the stage for everything that follows.
Okay, let's unpack this. We open Genesis 50 in the immediate aftermath of the death of Jacob, the patriarch of the family.
Right.
Joseph, his son, who has navigated his way to becoming one of the most powerful men in the entire Egyptian empire, has a deeply emotional reaction.
Yeah, he does.
The text explicitly tells us that Joseph throws himself on his father's face, weeping over him and kissing him. It's a profoundly vulnerable display for a man who holds immense worldly authority.
It really grounds the entire narrative in an undeniable humanity. I mean, beneath all the titles, the signet rings, the royal authority, Joseph is just a grieving son in this moment.
Exactly.
But the reality of his position means that right after this intimate moment of mourning, he has to make some very practical, highly public decisions about what happens next. Because Jacob has died in Egypt, but Joseph intends to honor a solemn promise to bury him back in Canaan.
Right, they have to travel.
Exactly. And to survive a long, hot journey across the desert, the body has to be meticulously preserved.
Which brings up a fascinating cultural clash. I mean, Joseph orders the embalming of his father, but how he goes about it is highly irregular.
What's fascinating here is the deliberate nature of Joseph's choice. He does not hand his father's body over to the traditional Egyptian priests.
No, he doesn't.
Instead, he orders his own servants, the Egyptian physicians, to handle the embalming process.
And based on the study notes from both the Holman and the NAA Bibles, that is a crucial distinction. In ancient Egypt, embalming and mummification weren't just medical procedures.
Not at all.
They were deeply religious rituals overseen by the priesthood. They were completely intertwined with the Egyptian theology of the afterlife. So by bypassing the priests and utilizing medical professionals, Joseph is actively stripping the embalming process of its pagan religious significance.
He's separating the science from the theology. He needs the practical, physical result of mummification so Jacob's body can survive the trip back to the Promised Land. But he refuses to subject his Hebrew father to the rituals of the Egyptian pantheon.
It's brilliant.
It is a masterful, calculated move. It demonstrates how Joseph, despite being fully assimilated into the highest echelons of Egyptian government, remains fiercely protective of his family's unique spiritual identity.
He navigates the cultural waters beautifully. And that careful navigation extends to the timeline of their grief, too, which our sources detail pretty specifically.
Yeah, the timeline is interesting.
The embalming process itself takes the standard 40 days. But then, the text notes that the Egyptians mourned for Jacob for 70 days. That is over 2 months of national mourning for a foreign shepherd.
We really need to pause on that 70-day figure because it's staggering when you understand the historical context. According to the study materials, a 70-day mourning period was an honor exclusively reserved for royalty.
Wow.
We're talking about the customs and protocols usually afforded only to pharaohs and the absolute highest status individuals in the empire.
So the entire Egyptian state apparatus essentially grinds to a halt to give a Hebrew immigrant a state funeral fit for a king.
Pretty much.
It speaks volumes about the sheer respect and absolute power Joseph commanded. The nation is honoring the father of their savior, really, the man who steered them through a catastrophic famine.
And that level of respect becomes even more apparent when Joseph prepares to actually transport his father back to Canaan. He has to officially request permission from Pharaoh to leave the country to fulfill his oath.
Right, he can't just leave.
Exactly. And Pharaoh grants it immediately, telling him to go and bury his father. This initiates what has to be one of the most logistically massive and politically significant funeral processions in ancient history.
Our sources emphasize the sheer scale of this procession. It wasn't just Joseph, his brothers, and a few wagons making a quiet trek back home.
No, not at all.
The text tells us it included all of Pharaoh's officials, the senior members of Pharaoh's court, and all the elders of the land of Egypt, plus chariots and horsemen.
You have to visualize the optics of this. The highest-ranking members of the Egyptian aristocracy, essentially the entire functioning brain trust of the empire, are traveling across the ancient Near East alongside a family of Hebrew shepherds.
It's wild to picture.
It was a massive show of diplomatic force, deep respect, and unexpected unity. The logistics alone of moving a royal caravan of that size, securing water and provisions across the desert, are mind-boggling.
It's a phenomenal image. And eventually, this massive convoy arrives at the Jordan River, specifically at a place called the threshing floor of Atad.
Right.
Now, a threshing floor functionally is a large, elevated, flat rock surface used for separating grain, which makes it the perfect geographical staging ground for a gathering of thousands of people in chariots. Here they pause for another intense period of mourning, 7 days of lamentation.
The linguistic details provided in the study materials really bring the weight of this moment to the surface. The Hebrew word used here for their weeping is baka.
Baka.
Yeah. And across Semitic languages, this root word denotes something far beyond shedding a quiet tear. It signifies loud, bitter, abundant crying. It's a visceral, communal wailing.
And it's not just Jacob's immediate family wailing, it's the entire Egyptian elite. The mourning is so loud and so intense that the local Canaanites living in the area take notice.
They definitely do.
They watch this massive foreign caravan grieving openly by the river, and they are so struck by the gravity of the scene that they actually rename the location.
They call it Abel Mizraim, which translates to mourning of the Egyptians. It's a striking linguistic marker in the original text, really turning the physical geography into a permanent historical record of this extraordinary cultural crossover.
From there, the family finally crosses into Canaan and buries Jacob in the cave of Machpelah. And the study Bibles remind us of the immense historical weight of this specific location.
Yes.
This is the very same burial plot that Abraham bought from Ephron the Hittite generations ago.
It serves as a physical anchor for the family's faith. Abraham, Isaac, and now Jacob are all resting in the exact land that God promised would eventually belong to their descendants.
That's powerful.
They're claiming a piece of the promised land in death, even while the living members of the family are preparing to head back to a life in Egypt. It brings the patriarchal promise full circle.
But the piece of that closure is incredibly short-lived. They pack up, make the long trek back to Egypt, and here's where it gets really interesting. With Jacob dead, the singular buffer holding this fragile family dynamic together evaporates.
Poof, it's gone.
Yeah, and Joseph's brothers absolutely panic.
For 17 years, while Jacob lived with them in safety in Egypt, the brothers likely felt secure. But now they're entirely convinced that Joseph has simply been biding his time out of respect for their father. All that repressed guilt from the pit, the betrayal, and the slave traders comes rushing back to the surface. They assume Joseph is finally going to unleash a calculated, brutal revenge.
It's the psychological equivalent of waiting for the other shoe to drop for almost 2 decades.
The anxiety must have been suffocating.
It must have been. And that fear drives them to preemptive, desperate action.
Yeah.
They send a message to Joseph claiming it was their father's dying wish that Joseph forgive their transgression.
Which is...
Yeah, whether Jacob actually said this or they invented it as a shield is left completely ambiguous in the text.
What isn't ambiguous is their next move. They come to Joseph, fall down flat at his feet, and say, "Behold, we are your servants," essentially offering themselves as his slaves. The irony is profound.
It really is.
Driven by their own crushing guilt, they are physically fulfilling the exact prophetic dreams of Joseph's youth that they tried so violently to prevent.
The psychological weight of stepping into the exact scenario they tried to destroy him over must have been staggering for them. They're on the floor, offering up their freedom, fully expecting the executioner's axe to finally fall. But Joseph's reaction subverts every expectation of ancient Near Eastern power dynamics. He weeps, Again,
He refuses to play the role of the vengeful tyrant. When they speak to him from the floor, he asks them a rhetorical question. Am I in the place of God? He's firmly telling them that he is not their judge and he's not their executioner. He steps back from the seat of retributive justice.
and his next words are incredible.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this moment sets up the definitive theological takeaway of the entire Joseph narrative. He looks at his brothers, the men who fractured his life, and he says, "You meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to preserve the lives of many people."
It's a massive shift.
You meant evil against me, but God meant it for good. It is a massive paradigm shift regarding human agency and divine sovereignty. And the study notes provide some essential context regarding the Nile River to demonstrate just how concrete this reality was.
We have to look at the agricultural reality of ancient Egypt here. The survival and wealth of the entire civilization relied completely on the Nile River and its annual flooding, which deposited fertile black mud across the region.
Right.
But that flooding was entirely dependent on winter rains far to the south in Ethiopia.
And when those distant winter rains failed, the Nile didn't flood. The resulting famine was absolute devastation. What Joseph is articulating to his brothers is that their horrific betrayal was the exact painful mechanism God used to position him in the highest seat of Egyptian government at the precise moment this catastrophic agricultural failure hit.
He's telling them that God utilized their sin to place him exactly where he needed to be to manage the crisis, distribute the grain, and ultimately save massive populations, including the very family that sold him.
Yes.
The study of Bibles frame this beautifully. God transforms the soot of human sin into the diamond of divine blessing.
It is a profound theology of restoration. God did not cause their evil, but he masterfully wove their terrible choices into a tapestry of widespread salvation. Because Joseph is able to view his own suffering through that sovereign lens, he's able to truly forgive them. He speaks kindly to them, removes the threat of retaliation, and promises to continue providing for them and their children.
That masterclass in grace really sets the trajectory for the remainder of Joseph's life. As we look at his final years, the text paints a picture of incredible peace and restoration. He lives to be 110 years old.
And we shouldn't gloss over that specific number. The Holman notes point out that in ancient Egyptian culture, 110 years was considered the absolute ideal, perfectly blessed lifespan.
Really?
Yeah. For the original readers, this was a cultural shorthand signifying a life fully and completely blessed by God.
He lives long enough to see his family rapidly expand, too. He sees the third generation of his son Ephraim and the children of his grandson Mashir. The text includes this tender detail where it says, these children were born or brought up on Joseph's knees.
Which means
The study note suggests this implies a formal, loving adoption into the family line.
it reveals a man who survived intense trauma, enslavement, and false imprisonment, but ended his life surrounded by generations of family, entirely at peace with his past. But crucially, even in that peace, Joseph knows that the wealth and comfort of Egypt is not their final destination.
Right.
As he's dying, he makes a prophetic promise to his brothers and their descendants.
He tells them, I am about to die, but God will certainly visit you. That phrasing is so powerful. God will visit you, and he will bring you out of this land and back to the land. He swore to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob.
He's anchoring the next generation to the ancient promise, and he requires a physical action to solidify that faith. He makes the sons of Israel swear an oath, instructing them that when God eventually visits them, they must carry his bones up from Egypt. He wants his remains to rest in the promised land.
Which brings us to the final lingering image of the entire book of Genesis. The very last verse tells us that Joseph dies at a 1 in 10. He is embalmed just like his father, and he is placed in a coffin in Egypt.
It acts as a historical cliffhanger. That coffin, containing Joseph's preserved body, sat in Egypt for centuries. It waited there as a silent, visible reminder to the Israelites of a future promise that had yet to be fulfilled.
Every time they saw it.
Every time they saw it, they were reminded of the oath. It wasn't until Moses led the Exodus generations later that they finally took those bones and transported them to the Promised Land.
It's an incredibly evocative conclusion to the book. So, what does this all mean for you as you process this deep dive today? When you reflect on Joseph's narrative, consider the theme of perspective. How often do we view our own current struggles, our significant setbacks, or even betrayals by people we trust as permanent, unredeemable disasters?
Too often.
What if those very moments are actually the exact uncomfortable setups required to bring about a much greater good in your future? Joseph's story challenges us to stop judging the end of our story by the middle of our pain.
That is the core challenge of the text. And I'll leave you with this final provocative thought to mull over as you step back into your routine. We discussed Joseph's coffin sitting in Egypt for centuries as a silent, physical reminder of a future promise yet to be fulfilled. What silent promises or delayed hopes are sitting in your own life right now? What are those things you are holding on to, waiting for the proper season to be carried forward into their ultimate fulfillment? Consider that sometimes the waiting itself is an essential part of the promise.
That is a brilliant question to carry with us. Thank you all for joining us for this extensive journey through Genesis 50. It's been a true joy unpacking this material with you. Before we close, as I promised at the beginning, I want to leave you with this. God blesses all the listeners. Have a wonderful, insightful week, and we will see you next time on The Deep Dive.